Hello, I am Charlotte from the Trauma Informed Teacher. I am coming to you today filming from Southern Maryland. This is my parents' house. I'm out here for Thanksgiving, and I just thought I would come on here today because Michelle Emerson of Pocketful of Primary did a teacher tag a few weeks ago, and I wanted to respond to her question. The teacher tag is called Pandemic Teaching Tag. So if you are a YouTuber and also a teacher, if you have a channel, or even if you do not and you just like to respond, you can download these 10 questions and answer them in your own video or send me a comment below so that we can check on each other. I think it's super important right now for us to support each other and see how everybody's doing and how everyone's dealing with the teaching during a pandemic. So here goes. Question number one. Are you teaching in person, hybrid, or virtually? So this answer is changing. The first quarter, we opted to go for completely remote learning with all of our students. And then as we got closer to the second quarter, there was a lot of conversation back and forth on both sides. Ultimately, at our board meeting right before our second quarter, the board voted to keep us 100% remote until second semester and then revisit at that time. But shortly after that decision, there was a group of parents that came to discuss options for, what would it look like if we would offer parents a choice and families a choice. And so ultimately that decision was looked at again, and then we came back to the idea of hybrid. So here we are. We've been planning for a hybrid model all along, and we're finally doing it. We've only been teaching hybrid for a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving, so it's kind of early to say like how it's going yet, but I will say that it seems like our plan has been well laid out and pretty smooth for what I expected. There's a lot of things to remember, with all the cleaning protocols, and we have to have mask breaks, so there's timing involved with making sure that our students are not passing each other in the hallways and things like that. But overall, I'm very happy with how it's going. So right now we are hybrid. I would say about 50%, maybe 55% of our students are back in person, and the other half, 40, 45, 50% are still working remotely. All right, so how does it work? In our district, what we've decided to do is we're only going in person Tuesdays and Thursdays. And normally we're on a 4-block schedule. Before, when we were doing only remote, we did 1 block per day dedicated to each teacher for that block. But now that we are back in person with part of our students, it's working a little differently. But basically Mondays we Zoom with all of our students first and second block to get them ready for the work for that week. Then Tuesdays we either start with our first block students and Zoom with our second, or we start with our second block students and Zoom with our first. And actually the second class is kind of flexible, so if we just had independent work, those students could do that. We don't have to Zoom with that second class. But the reason for that is that we're avoiding bringing any groups of students into a room after we've already had another group of students. I guess a lot of the data out there is showing that if you can keep the groups of students apart and you're creating kind of a bubble with that cohort of students, only move, in between cleanings, thorough cleanings, then it's a lot safer. So that's why we opted to do that instead of having class changes. I know a lot of other districts that are doing class changes and then they're just cleaning the best they can, but we actually have like electrostatic cleaners that come in. They come in and bring these machines in on the off days and clean every room really well, really thoroughly before we have a new group of students. So we're never mixing students in a room that hasn't been like thoroughly cleaned. So that makes me feel more comfortable for it. And basically, like, the first week we start with first block, and then Thursday third block, and the second week we start with second block and then fourth block on Thursday. So that way we get students in person every other week. Now, as far as having remote students join in with our in-person learners, that's completely up to the teachers, your level of comfort. I have done it a couple of times so far. I wouldn't say that it works for every single lesson. And of course, I'm still learning how to do this like everybody, but I really enjoy doing it. We did an experiment in one of my classes, and basically what happened was one of my remote learners, I said, hey guys, if you want to zoom in for our experiment, it's going to be at this time. And one of my remote learners took us up on it. So the students that were in person were able to describe what was going on, and he could see what was going on. And then they explained like the science behind it and helped each other, which I really enjoyed, because one of the biggest things I think that we're missing right now is that like ability for students to help each other with learning. Sometimes, like, as I feel like as a remote teacher, that I do so much talking at my students, and I'm trying to work on that student engagement piece, but there's nothing better than having students have the ability to be able to help each other. All right, question number 2. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing? I'd say that I go between a 6 and an 8, and my 8 is basically the days that I'm able to do experiments and hands-on things with my students, and I have a high level engagement. I'm able to help a student that day, you know, catch on to something that I wasn't able to do when all of them were remote. Even the day that I had the student that zoomed in and helped, other students helped him understand what was going on, that was like a big moment of joy for me, because I felt like my students were learning, and when my students are learning, I'm happy, and I'm an 8. The struggle is like when I feel like I am pulling teeth with some of my students to get them engaged, and you know, so some of those remote days that we have still can be like that. Sometimes just getting some of my remote learners engaged can be like that on any day, and that's when I'm more of a 6, especially because we have a lot of documentation to do to show that we're trying to help those students, and you know, extra paperwork and things like that over things that, you know, I normally do, but having to document it to show that I'm doing it, you know, that's a struggle. And sometimes I get discouraged with that when you make phone calls and then there's no like good outcome from that on the other end. So, you know, of course I want all my students to be successful, and so as a teacher, when students aren't engaging, it's, you know, you take that on yourself, like that's personal, because I want, you know, I want to do my part as best as I can. So between 6 and an 8. Right now I'm doing great. Hey, I'm on break until tomorrow when I have to do remote learning again. All right, next question. Question number 3. What is one positive thing about your teaching format? At the beginning of the year, I would say that our virtual was going much better than it did last year. Just more of our kids were engaged at the very beginning of the year. Now that we're hybrid, I think that I feel pretty good about my growth in the area of engaging students online. I've tried some different things. Some of the things that have worked the best have been like Padlet discussions. Michelle gave a great video, if you don't already use Padlet in your classroom, on how to make that work for you. 7 different ways I think she gave, and it's a really good video, so check it out. I will link in the comments to that video so you can check it out if you don't know how to use Padlet. But any kind of discussion forum, I've really been successful in getting my students engaged. So that, Flipgrids, breakout rooms, and we use Zoom, but you know, Google Meet works just as well. Breakout rooms are new on Google Meets. Students, anytime that you can get students talking and working together like you would when we were in the regular classroom without the restrictions, that brings back a lot of the cooperative elements that we know work for students. I mean, the research shows that it works for students. So I feel like I've gotten a lot better with doing that remotely than I used to be. What's one thing that you're rocking while teaching during a pandemic? And I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying before, student engagement. I feel very confident in, well, first of all, as my students enter my Zooms during my remote learning days, I have a question of the day that I've posted, and I can use that as like a bell ringer, or it could be like a social emotional question, whatever I want to ask my students at the beginning, but I have it posted when they come in with music in the background to get them in the mood. in my classroom mood, and then they have 5 minutes to put their answer in the chat, and then we always talk about it right afterwards. So I like that start to my day. It gets my students like in the mindset that I want them in for my classroom. And then using breakout rooms anytime I can for student discussion. And I also have recently started incorporating Google Jamboard into my lessons online, and I love Google Jamboard. All right, what's one challenge that you faced and how have you overcome it? I think the biggest challenge is the students that are unresponsive, and I'm hearing this everywhere. Teachers all over the nation, and even I've heard some teachers internationally talking about it, that, you know, some students, remote learning works great for them and they're excelling, and, you know, some of them working better than they did in a face-to-face environment. Other students, they check out. They don't think it's real school, and that's the biggest struggle is, you know, sometimes even with parents, letting them understand, like, look, this is real school. We're really working, we're really learning. Teachers are really teaching, like, you know, it's not a day off when we teach from home, like we're working, you know. That's a big struggle, is just, you know, if making a phone call would get the results that you would expect it to get and get the students back on track 100% of the time, no problem at all. But the reality is that sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And we have some students that just still are not engaging, and that's frustrating for me because I have like a no failure rule in my classroom. Like, I don't allow my students to fail. And I tell them that, like, from day one, when the students come into my classroom and I'm telling them about myself, the first thing that I always say is, you're not allowed to fail in my class. Like, you're not, I won't let you. And some of them like test me and try me to see if it's true. And, you know, some of those students actually are doing really well with remote learning, but some of them are still like having some of the same struggles that they do to engage in the one-on-one face-to-face environment as well. And it's a lot harder to pull kids aside when they're not there. And even when they are there, like, you know, there's limitations to like how close you can get to them. So that makes it difficult for you to like really help a student when you have to keep your distance. So that's one of the things that, you know, I wish that we could find a solution for. So what am I doing to overcome that challenge? I've been trying to focus my mind and my energy on students that are engaging in the learning process. And that doesn't mean by any means that I'm dropping the ball with my other students, because I'm continuing to work with them. But what I mean by that is that, like, I'm not allowing those students that aren't engaging to let me get down to the point where I'm discouraged when it's time for me to meet with the students that are engaging. And so what I'm doing is I'm planning a lot of like really fun interactive things for the students that are engaging, and in hopes that, you know, I know these kids talk to each other. They have Snapchat, they have social media outlets, they have text, and they communicate with each other. And, you know, sometimes I can actually get students to come into my online environment when they've heard that we're doing something cool from another student or whatever. So I'm focusing my positive energy on the kids who are engaging, and I'm just continuing to work steadily and continuing to call as I have the time all of my students every week, as many as I can, the ones that are not engaging. And that's the best that I can do. And I know right now, like, we have to, as teachers, do our very best. And then at the end of the day, when the day is over, if it didn't work out that day, then we just have to try again tomorrow. So that's how I'm overcoming it. What's one thing that's made teaching easier for you during a pandemic? I think that, like, I really realized during this whole process, like, how important environment is to me. I never really realized how much my environment plays into how I feel. But what I noticed was that when we first started virtually and I was just on the couch all the time or whatever, like, I was finding myself like really frustrated, and just like I didn't know if I was coming or going, and I could never like cut off my work hours. But then we designed an office space for me on our front porch in our old house, And, you know, I got a new desk and I got a rug and I set everything up so that it felt like I was at school, and I would go to my work area, and then at the end of the day I would close my laptop and I would leave my work area. And so that has definitely helped me, was having like the right environment. Even when we went back to the classroom, the first thing that I did was I started pulling everything out of my closet that I hadn't had a chance to work on before, and organizing and getting rid of things and like simplifying things. And then I just hung up some mood lights and, you know, decorated like a corner area for me as a teacher. And those like little environment things just made me feel comfortable and at home. And that has been a huge help to me, like mindset wise, as we went into hybrid learning. All right, question number 7. What's one change that you made and you'll continue doing when the pandemic ends? Less paper. I have really enjoyed not having as many stacks of papers to grade, and I like not having to lug things home with me as often. And I know I'm still using just a little bit of paper now. Like when we do experiments, it's not always like easy for me to have the kids' Chromebooks sitting out on the table when we're dealing with like water and messy things. So having a paper, okay, if it gets wet, it's fine, it'll just dry, not like getting Chromebook wet, right? So occasionally I'll have some things that are paper, but overall my stacks are less and less and less. And I can just simply like take my laptop and bring that home, and that's it. Like I can work from anywhere that there's Wi-Fi. So I love that. What has been your favorite purchase during the pandemic? I love my home office desk. I love my rug. My office desk has a really large workspace, so I can have some things set up like temporarily and other things like set up permanently on there and still have plenty of room to work. And it has really good storage drawers too, so I have some of my favorite go-to teaching books in there. But as far as a techie tool that I've purchased during the pandemic, I have purchased Movavi video editor. That's actually what I use for all of my editing for my YouTube channel videos, and I will link that in the description box. But I really love Movavi video editor because everything is so simple. Like it's just so much easier even than I think iMovie. It's easy to figure out. Like, you know, I'm like moderately tech savvy, but if things are too technical, it's difficult for me. And I picked it up and just played around with it and just started clicking into things. Maybe watched a few videos of other people that use it. And anytime I couldn't figure anything out, if I looked it up, there was an answer for it like that. So I really love it. I use it for teaching videos. I use it for my YouTube channel, and that's my favorite tech tool by far. All right, how have you been taking care of yourself? I'm actually getting ready to do a video on teacher self-care. I just recently did a presentation for our local NERISA, which is like our leadership conference and our leadership organization in the area, on teacher self-care. So I've done a lot of research on this recently, and because I'm getting ready to have knee surgery and I've been working on, you know, getting as healthy as possible before that, this has also been an issue for me, like something I've been thinking about in my everyday life, even if there wasn't a pandemic. But obviously this is as good a time as any to take care of yourself, because the healthier you are, the more your immunity is up and the less chance of getting COVID. So as far as what I've been doing, mentally, I've just been trying to not respond to students after hours, making sure that there's a certain time of day when I just close my laptop and, you know, I have Google Hangouts, and so I get messages and notifications, and sometimes I just have to ignore them. I do usually check and just say, okay, what is it? And make sure there's nothing like an emergency or something. And then if it's not an emergency, then I just wait. And I just, once in a while, I might say, hey, it's the weekend, or hey, you know, it's 8 o'clock or whatever. And my students will be like, oh, okay, sorry. And I'll be like, I'll talk to you on Monday, talk to you tomorrow. I had a couple of kids that sent me messages like, help, I need to know how to do this over Thanksgiving break. And I was like, I just didn't answer because as soon as I start, then some of them will be like, so what are you doing? And then they'll want to have like a little chat conversation, which is great during the week. But on Thanksgiving, I just really needed to unplug. So I have not allowed myself to answer those things. Physically, I've really been working on eating well. And I'm currently following a Mediterranean style diet, which it's not vegetarian. It's like plant predominant. So I'm eating mostly vegetables. Of course, you know, we've all been eating junk the last couple of days, I'm sure, but I feel like I've like not overdone it the way I might have in some years. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. And just trying to, you know, lose weight to get ready for my knee surgery. So all the things that you do for that, you know, watching your sugars and increasing your vegetables and drinking a lot of water, making sure I get enough sleep, those kinds of things. All right, question number 10. What's making you happy during this time? We recently moved to a house that is only 15 minutes away from the school. It's actually 13 minutes away from the school, which before we were driving like an hour and 10 minutes. And I can say that has made all of the difference. Like I've had so much more time at home, which gives me more time to cook instead of, you know, feeling like eating out more often. Now if I eat out, it's by choice. It's not by like necessity because I'm exhausted and I don't have enough time. As far as the new house goes, the house that we were living in before, we were intentionally living in a house that would be, you know, cheaper for us while our daughter finished school. We'd had some things that happened in the past in some of my previous videos I talked about that financially we needed to get ourselves like back on a track so that we could save again. And so the house was just not, it wasn't, you know, it was okay. And it was good for the season that we were in it, but the house that we're in now is like so much nicer. And I've really been enjoying like setting up. I'm still not completely unboxed because, you know, I'm just doing things slowly and I'm checking out like, where do I really want everything in this house? Like living in the house and like just kind of feeling it out. Like, what do I need here? What do I not need? And refusing to allow anything into my space that I don't absolutely love. And so it's, you know, just a process, and it'll probably be like next summer before I get it all finished as far as unboxing, making sure everything's set up. But I've really been enjoying that. I've been enjoying like setting up, enjoying my new kitchen, cooking a lot more than, you know, I used to cook a lot, and then we had this little tiny kitchen and the cupboards were like really tall and I had to get on a step stool every time I wanted to get things, and my dishes didn't fit properly in a lot of the lower cupboards, and it was just, it didn't have like a nice big work surface. So I'm really enjoying the fact that I have like a professional kitchen and a nice like gas stove and plenty of workspace, and it's nice. So when I come home at night, I turn on my music, I have a radio in there, and I just cook and I just relax and, you know, burn some candles, and it's nice. So I've been enjoying my new house. Also, I guess, you know, like everybody else, I've been enjoying time with family, more time than I had in the past. But if you are a teacher and you have your own YouTube channel, I'm challenging you to follow up on this teaching tag. Make sure that you tag Pocketful of Primary, Michelle Emerson, and let her know that you're in on the fun. And I want to hear from you. How are you doing in this pandemic? All right, I hope everybody is enjoying their Thanksgiving break, and I hope that you're not too stressed trying to get your lesson plans done for tomorrow. In fact, that's what I'm going to go do right now. I'll talk to everybody soon. Bye.